Welcome to the Human Origin Project, where we explore the science of you. To keep up to date, go to our iTunes channel and subscribe, and please leave a review if you enjoyed today's show. Tao, or Tao, is a Chinese word signifying way, path, route, or sometimes more loosely, principle or holistic beliefs. Taoism formed into a religious system within the lands of China sometime around the 4th or 3rd century BCE. Being the first to receive the inspiration of the Tao, some cite Lao Tzu as the first Taoist philosopher and the author of the Taoist text known as the Tao Ching. In this episode, we interview guest Andrew McCart, author of the Alchemists Tao Ching, a book describing modern meditation practices using Tao philosophy. In a conversation that spans Eastern medicine, philosophy, and a guided meditation, Andrew takes us through how implementing Tao in your life can have a profound impact on your happiness and health. Hey Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for asking me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, you're on the other side of the world. We're on different time zones, but we're joining together today to talk about your practice of Taoism, and it's a pleasure having you here today. And it's been really interesting the last few months. We've been working on understanding more about your practice and how you apply Taoism in modern meditational methods, and how people have really seen benefits with your practice. So thank you very much for joining us, and we're looking forward to diving into this today. Can you tell us a little bit about how yourself, your general training and upbringing, and how you got into understanding and studying Taoism?
Yeah, I'd be happy to tell you about that. And it's kind of looking back on it, it was kind of a series of lucky events. But yeah, I'll be happy to tell you about that. And I got into this about around the age of 20, and I'm 39 now, so I've been learning about this, or unlearning, depending on how you want to look at it, for a little while in this area. And one of the lucky things that happened is I was in college and got into some Tai Chi and Reiki, and started understanding a little more about energetics. And it was just kind of at a more of a surface level with the Tai Chi and a elective class at our university. And as I was starting to graduate, I got into some harder styles of martial arts, so some of the Korean arts like Taekwondo and Hapkido. And to start out, it was really helpful for me because it got me back into my body. And I think, like a lot of people, at least in my culture here in the United States, a lot of people, our mental energy is not in our body. Like, we're thinking about what we've got to do, or we're pouring our energy into a computer screen, or we didn't have smartphones back then, but we were, for me, it's like my energy was floating around outside my body, and martial arts helped me to get that energy back into my body. And at the martial arts school I just happened into, there was a teacher in there that he was about my age, but he'd been at martial arts for maybe 10 years. And he said, "Hey, I'd like to teach you the inner smile and the 6 healing sounds, the microcosmic orbit, which are 3 best practices." And so that was kind of where it started. But does that make sense, or give you a reference point as far as like the energy not being in my body and kind of like floating around outside my physical body? Can you relate to that and what you've seen?
Absolutely. It's really interesting how, you went through that process of understanding through martial arts. But really and this kind of really kind of delves through a few different modalities of Eastern medicine and Tai Chi, for instance, that talk about how this idea of looking within, and that's what I find so interesting about Taoism, is that it has these very similar principles of understanding within. That goes across many different philosophies, but it's very unique in the way it's applied. And so you kind of took this road from martial arts to, and do you remember what was it that struck your interest in Taoism or Taoism?
Well, it was kind of the people that were into it seemed to have a level of centeredness that I didn't have. And actually, one thing, now that I'm retelling this story, around the same time as I was kind of getting into the Tai Chi, I was with a friend and we got robbed in Venezuela. And I looked back on that experience and I thought, my awareness, if I'd have been more aware, if I'd have been more present, I would have seen the warning signs. And I thought, this is kind of a wake-up call. I can go back and learn awareness, and martial arts seems like a good way to do that. And so one thing about this is that I've learned over time is bringing our energy back to our body. Not only does it kind of awaken the awareness of our organs and the capacity that they have, that almost borders lines on a sixth sense, because our organs in the classical Chinese medicine, the Taoist philosophy, the organs tune into the larger environment in a way that our mental faculties just don't seem to. And so awakening that intelligence did give me some more awareness and allow me to be able to perceive situations in a way that I wasn't before. But at the same time, when my energy was staying closer to my body, closer to those organs, I was able to have more health and vitality instead of the energy pouring into mental exercises or the nightly news or worrying, emotional. I talk a lot about mental exercise, but also emotional issues of worrying and fear and anger was a big one for me. And so reclaiming some of that energy and using it in a more productive way for our health and our vitality instead of for stress or worry was something that very early on I saw as a benefit in just a month of studying these Taoist practices. And so when I first learned those, and I'll take it back to those basic exercises, the inner smile, the 6 healing sounds, microcosmic orbit, basic Qigong and moving the body, got me aware of my body and having my energy closer to my body. And so I think those are some of the benefits and the reasons why I stuck around and kept with the practice all this time.
And I feel like with, especially for me in my life, I've had a lot of times where I've been, stressed or angry, and you do tend to pin that onto external forces, blaming it on other people or blaming it on circumstance. And we don't really have a way, especially where I'm from in Sydney in Australia, of expressing that or getting to know the reasons behind why you're reacting a certain way. And I find it really fascinating reading and hearing your story, that you've found a way that you can, look within and learn from your body, learn from the energy that you have and how to pass that in and out of your life to other people. And I just wanted to know what you would recommend to people as from starting from scratch. Maybe they live in a city, maybe they're very far away from what they consider to be, Taoism. But I was just wondering if you could, shed some light on what you would recommend.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And if we were going to start with just one thing, it would be to put your hands on your navel and breathe, and kind of watch that the hands go up and down, feel your abdomen expand. That would be just a wonderful place to start. And it's probably too simple that it doesn't. I would have ignored it before I got into this. I would have said that's too simple. That'll never work. I'd rather pay thousands of dollars for something else, or search for many more decades. But it could really be that simple as just bringing your awareness back to your breath. And science will tell us, and medical science will tell us that the vagus nerve can calm down, and it goes through the entire abdomen and affects all of the organs. And when the vagal tone relaxes, you're able to relax your entire being, and you can control that through your breath and slowing that down. And so we know those things intuitively as well. If taking my word for it doesn't work, but so start with the breath and slow it down. And if you can't meditate for an hour a day, meditate for 2 or 3 minutes a day. That's a great place to start. And as you find that stillness in your body, it will start to sort of bleed over into the rest of your life. You don't meditate to get good at meditation. You meditate to get good at life, and if you can find stillness for a few minutes in the morning and or the evening, then for me, I was able to slow down my perspective and make better choices. Because as you said earlier, we blame it on circumstances. We tend to be reactive, and I think we would all make a good choice if we were actually choosing. But so much of what we do is an unconscious reaction. We're not responding. We don't have the ability to respond. Often, it's usually just a reaction, and slowing down a little bit between the stimulus you have and the response that you give causes me to be able to make a better choice. And so breathing and slowing down can really help with that. So that's why I recommend breathing. And I'd like you to kind of interject your thoughts on that. But I have another step after breathing that we can talk about in just a moment. But what do you think? Do you find that slowing down your breathing, noticing that would be a good place to start?
Andrew, one thing I find with breathing in particular is it's become very much in vogue in terms of, the idea of, calming the anxious state, or people that suffer from depression and these states where the neurological system doesn't calm down. And I see it in dental practice where, when you look at patients, no one's been told how to breathe. And that's that simple exercise that you do is one thing that I guide with patients, just as a very baseline way to kind of help them feel their breath. And it's amazing how confused some people are in terms of being told to breathe in a certain way and how it's just so foreign to them. And we now know, like you said, that the science is showing how important that is for calming and pushing the autonomic nervous system into parasympathetic. And when we don't breathe, there are many physiological effects as a result. And so the feeling of anxiety seems to be the body telling us that we're not doing something right. And there's obviously a lot of things to that, but it makes complete sense, and it's such a simple application. But bringing and teaching people to get back to their breath is just such a powerful practice that you're bringing to people. And I don't see many healthcare practitioners doing this, and I think it's something that's really needed. So it's amazing. How do you feel? I mean, so in terms of Taoism guides us to understand the body in a very specific way, and so it talks about the energies obviously inside our body, and then planet Earth, and then the solar system. So how does it start to help us to understand how the energies inside our body fit into the broader kind of obviously planet Earth is a much bigger organism, but how does that all start to fit in? How is that explained?
Well, that's a great question, and a lot of times trying to define Taoism is not as easy. Even the Tao Te Ching, the first verse says, if you could explain the Tao, it's not the real Tao, because words can't explain it. But I'll give my humble attempt here to do so. And back to what you said about the breathing, something that should be so natural is foreign to a lot of people. And the same thing with moving our bowels, or even drinking enough water, squatting, sitting, standing. These basic things we used to do naturally, we now have to be taught and hire coaches and relearn all of those things the further our society and body have gone from a natural state. So that's kind of the process of, I think, of Taoism, is relearning things that we knew and things that we did naturally as a baby. But I want to touch on what you said and then answer your question directly. But you asked about understanding the body in a specific way, and that was one of the appeals that drew me to Taoism early on, and continues to, is that it seems to have the Taoist path or methods that I've learned seem to have a very specific way of explaining the way energy moves in the body, and a whole map of meditation and movement for health and vitality. Before, when I was just wondering what meditation was or trying to learn, there were things like maybe try watching a candle, or sitting and stilling your mind. And I could never still my mind, but a meditation like the Inner Smile, which says, okay, go through a bit of a checklist of your heart, your lungs, liver, spleen, kidneys, and go to those and thank them for the things that they do for you. And so that gave my mind something to do while I was moving energy around my body, which kind of, in a way, it's kind of like pacifying the mind, like giving a baby a pacifier. You give your mind and your brain something to do, so it's not just trying to escape the whole time while your body's coming alive. So this, to follow up on what you said about understanding the body in a specific way, the Taoist path has a way of understanding energy from your body, your physical body, all the way to the planet, to the solar system, the stars, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So how does the body fit into the larger environment? And a simple way to look at it is that we have the 5 elements in Taoism. So we have the earth, water, wood, fire, and metal. And they call them elements, but it's really 5 phases of energy. So fire energy, if you have a fire personality, for instance, then you want to kind of go out in all directions at the time. You're very joyful, very happy, loving, hugging on people when you see them. So your personality is a bit like fire, and it goes in all directions. Now, if it's dysfunctional, you might be cruel, impatient, angry. Can touch on that a little bit. So thinking about those 5 elements expands out to the larger environment. And my liver, for instance, the wood phase of my body can relate to forests, and it's the same map, but it's now out into the planet instead of just in my body. I can breathe between those. So connecting and hardwiring the aspects of myself into the larger part of nature along that map. So what does that sound like to you? Does that seem to where did I not explain that to this?
No, I think that metaphor you used is really a really nice way of painting that picture. I think you said something before about it reminded me of I listened to an Alan Watts podcast the other day, and he said, talking about Taoism, those who say do not know, and those who know do not say. It's so asking, what it is, it's really difficult to define because it's not a knowing, it's kind of a feeling and understanding. And I find that such a powerful message. And I'm quite new to the philosophy of Taoism, but I really resonate with what you're talking about, and I feel that me and Stephen were talking about this before, how it's so important to focus intention and energy on yourself. And once you can understand yourself, then you can start expanding out. And but if you haven't got yourself, if you can't focus on those energies and those simple things like breathing and quietening the mind, or they sound so simple, but they're so fundamental in growing and expanding. And I think, did you find that when you started practicing things within yourself and then started to fall into place, and then you started getting an understanding of how that related to how you moved through the world and how you interacted with other people?
Yes, I did see that, and I'll try to tell you a few different ways that helped. And so the Taoist approach would be, just as you said, to really start with yourself and try to help yourself to be strong and healthy and clear-minded and grounded, so that when I go out and help other people, I'm doing it from the right place. The Taoist mindset is that I want to grow virtue, positive virtues of kindness and neighborliness. I want to have those inside my being at a very a tangible level, tangible way that I can feel that my liver, for instance, is functioning properly, and the emotions and virtues of kindness are present instead of like stuckness or anger. And so then when I have kindness or love or stability, gentleness, courage in my life, then I can have a chance to share those with others. And So it's like a tuning fork metaphor in music, that if my tuning fork is vibrating at a certain frequency that is of love, then I'm much more easily able to share that out in my community. So that's one part of it. Another part of it would be that as we're out there giving, and I'm a teacher, so this is important to me, and if I'm giving to students and putting my energy out there and pouring it into someone else or 20 people in a class, I have to have a lot of energy to begin with, or I'll drain my vitality, and it can wear me out. So to be able to share in the world, we want to be strong ourselves, and that's a big part of it, that it focused on the physical body. So I keep coming back to that, but that's the way I experience it. And another aspect, and I'll get into that in a minute, but often in spiritual paths, so not just beginners, but veterans of spiritual paths, they want to go out to the stars and the planets, and because that's where the juice is. And it feels it feels great to have a trip with meditating on the Big Dipper all night or something like that. But if we're not grounded, it can kind of blow our circuits. So like if we're a 10-watt light bulb and we bring in 100 watts of electricity, it may just blow our circuits out. So I don't know if you hear of, I need to get a drink just a second, if you'll excuse me. Okay, thank you for that. So if we are, a lot of times people want to go out to the edge of the cosmos or deal with the stars and the planets, but we can only absorb what we're able to handle by being grounded. So that connection to the physical body, connection to the earth, and sometimes we hear about like a Kundalini blowout or a healing crisis where people's circuits all open up and they're not able to handle the amount of energy that's pouring into them. And so I think a very grounded physical body, slow and steady, gradual approach can do that. And I found that in the Taoist path here. And I don't know if you all see that in these circles where you run in, where maybe people try to move a little too fast, or does that sound familiar in examples you've seen?
Yeah, it certainly does. The way that Taoism kind of categorizes personalities, but also then understanding how the different organs and the different energies and the alchemy of the inner alchemy of how our energies all work together really does start to make you see how people, the water, wood, fire, metal, earth, how that different parts of it are resonating in certain times, and how people, maybe they do have too much fire, or certain people, maybe they can't, they can't find the action in order to, change the situation in their life. So it does make a lot of sense. You talk about describing how these elements move in a sequence, and I found that quite interesting in the article you wrote. How would you describe that sequence and how people understand the alchemic elements and how they work in the body?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because that was kind of one of the things that really it helped me. It was a big challenge. So if I were to go do my Chinese astrology chart, and you've got 5 elements, so 5 divided by 100% divided by 5 would mean you might have 20% of your energy in each element represented, but that's not the way. We very rarely come into this world that balanced, and so in my case, I had a very high percentage of the wood element. And so the wood, and I say elements, but again, they're more phases of energy. So if you think about the wood element or wood type energy in nature, it's the energy of spring, it's trees that grow up straight, it's grasses, flowers that bloom, that kind of energy. And so in a human being's activities, it looks like planning and goal setting and a general that wants to go get things done, or arrows that's shooting toward a target. And so I had a lot of that energy. And when it's going good, it's kindness and forgiveness, being friendly, which I have that. But when all that wood energy is not going well, then it can be anger, frustration, feeling stuck. As if the energy of planning and organizing your life and what you're actually doing, they don't match up, and your decision making's off. So having all of that wood energy, or any kind. I mean, I have friends that had 70% of their astrology was the earth element. And so whenever you've got that much of an abundance in something, then other things are lacking. So wood in the cycle of creation feeds fire. And what I needed to learn was to take all that planning and goal setting and actually take it into action, like the fire element, where I'm then going out in the world instead of sitting at home with my vision board, for instance, and refining the vision board. I then take action in the world. And from the fire phase, it goes into the earth phase, where you might think of this as like the harvest time in the earth. And so you're actually able to harvest the results of all the work that you've done in the other parts of the cycle. And then you can't stop there, though, because we've got the metal phase, or you think of it in terms of autumn, where the leaves fall to the ground so that the cycle can begin again, and you rest and recover in the metal phase, and then the water phase, and you get ready then for that first part of spring, which you all are about to heading into the winter solstice there in Australia. So you're just about to start this phase on a new cycle, and we're at the summer solstice here in Kentucky in the United States. And so we can kind of see how that answers your earlier question, how nature relates to the human body and the human's activities. So hopefully that provides the audience a little bit of insight from my own experience of too much wood element, trying to transform that to move through the cycle. Does that seem to sum it up in some way?
That definitely resonates with me for sure. I am a very good planner and very good at talking about ideas, but the actual manifestation of those ideas is probably the main thing lacking in my life, I'd say. So everything you were saying there, it really struck a nerve, and it's such a nice way of explaining things, and like it's such a flip on perspective from what we're used to over here. It's very linear thinking. It's very everything's happening and you're going in one direction. But I love the way that you're describing things as being more of an essence, more of a flow, and it's things start and things end, and it's all part of it. It's not we can't be stuck, if that makes sense.
Andrew, the principles of Taoism, they feel like they resonate across so many different, obviously alchemy, for instance, they use these ideas of the elements. Where do you see the crossover, and where have you seen, because you use a number of different practices with your, within your overall teachings, don't you? So how do you see all of these principles kind of crossing over, and where do you think, like for instance with Chinese medicine and alchemy, like how do all these things kind of meld in, and because they feel like they're coming from a similar source?
Yeah, well, that is a great question, and that's one of the neat things about Taoism, I think, is that it's kind of big enough to hold different traditions and different ideas, and at least the way I approach it. Now, you will meet Taoists out there that have a lineage, and they have been handed down from one master to another for even centuries and generations. And although I've had a lot of different teachers and continue to do so, I didn't come from such a lineage like that. And I can be happy to tell you in my information about where my training is all on my website and things. But, and I've had some of my teachers be accused of being a fake Taoist, whatever that is, because they didn't have a lineage. But they did learn from those people, and the practices work and they help people. And so I think that the broader and the more interesting results come from being open to new things. And I think that's what Taoists, for the most part, over time, that's how it evolved, was borrowing from Buddhism and sharing with Shintoism and taking the shamanic roots of people that, nomadic folks that were living very close to nature. And so that's why to me, that it seems to cross over into a lot of different realms, and it seems like a universal spiritual science, because it can encompass a lot of those things. And looking at how it relates to Western alchemy, or and I went on a trip one time with a Taoist teacher, and we spent a month in France looking at the different cathedrals that were all built on ancient, like Chartres Cathedral and other places in France, and we hiked our way down ancient pilgrim routes, looking at the Paleolithic worship sites and medieval sites and the great cathedrals of those ages, and practicing Taoist alchemy in those areas and awakening the chakras, as you might call them, awakening those energy centers that correspond to the glands of the body, and learning about that as we went. And it seemed to go hand in hand in the way I viewed it. And there's really just one body and one life force, and I think that's why it all, understanding a common language, and the Taoist path just seems to resonate with me. It can be, it could be farming, it can be Western magic, whatever a person's path is. I think that's great, and they can find happiness and health and the ability to help others. And the Taoist one just works for me, but it's certainly not the only game in town. And I would encourage your audience, or anyone that comes to me with these questions, to find one that works for them, because there's a lot more similar, I believe, in spiritual paths than there's different, as long as you don't get too dogmatic about it.
And as you were talking about that, physically seeing the cathedrals and physically, moving through and having a higher sort of perspective on things, taking it a step further to the solar system and sort of the alchemy of the planets and their motions. How has your practice sort of moved you in that direction, into a sort of a more cosmic, I guess, like conscious experience?
Yeah, well, that's so how is that's a great question, and it's getting into the juicy stuff, I think. So back to the issue of astrology, what we're talking about, thinking about my Western chart, Western astrology. It may be that, so I was going through a Saturn return, which is a phenomenon around the age of 28 and a half or 28 to 32, something like that, where it's said that when Saturn comes back around every 28, 30 years, that it's going to test the individual on the things that they should have learned over the last 30 years. And so at those periods, in their first Saturn return, second Saturn return, third, if you're and fourth, depending on how you make it. But it's going to be a challenging time, potentially, if you haven't done your work over the last cycle, or even if you have, and depending on how strong Saturn is in your chart, and just what else is going on in the heavens at that time. And I subscribe to these philosophies, and when I was going through that, my world did turn upside down. And so things that really helped me from the Taoist toolbox of practices were to focus on meditating with all of the planets. So if you've got one planet that's causing you some challenges, well, just like I said, kind of move the wood phase through my body, well, inviting in those other energies of the other planets help balance that out. So whether it's too much fire, or you've got a Mercury retrograde and you want to slow that down by inviting in other aspects of the solar system in, then you'll just have a more balanced approach. And perhaps if I'm starting a new job now, it's summer solstice, we're getting ready to move, and I've found that, first of all, being grounded. So at any level, you want to have your feet on the earth, and you want to have that connection to the earth. Beyond that, you can think about that energy of Jupiter is kind of the wood element or wood phase equivalent in the solar system of what I was saying with the liver and the planning, strategizing in the body. So it might be that I would even get a picture of Jupiter and stare at it, or tune into the frequency of Jupiter, and over time maybe you can learn to have a relationship with those organs. And that's one way that helps. And thinking about the quadrants and the stars, and these were on cave paintings in ancient China that different animals in the solar and the stars that related to the energies of the north, south, east, and west. And it was really quite a different time before we had television, primetime TV, and the internet, and 24-hour banking and things like that. We were in a lot closer relationship with nature, and they would watch the stars. I mean, that was their prime time. They would watch the stars and the different movements in the heavens and understand how those impacted their daily life and their farming. And fortunately, some of that knowledge has been passed down to us even now, and it's making a resurgence as far as I can see. I think it's a wonderful time to be alive as far as all the information that's available, and what's kind of been laying dormant and in hiding from the time when this knowledge was passed down in secret. And because, at least speaking to the ancient Taoists, the government was afraid of them. They were kind of scared of what they could do and what they knew, and a lot of times it was dangerous to be a Taoist, and unfortunately it's not now. So we can practice these things and talk about them on podcasts and use them in our lives to feel a little healthier. And at least in the United States, healthcare is facing it's not even facing it's in a crisis period, and chronic diseases are running wild, and here's a inexpensive way to live more of a natural and healthier life. So I kind of took it all the way to the based on, and it was a great question you asked, but going to the stars and then back down to what kind of water you're drinking. But it is all connected, and hopefully that's becoming apparent through as we're having this conversation.
Yeah, it's amazing actually, and it's kind of dawned on me as well. And even through you telling your story, you bring a lot of different philosophy and this open mind, with this authentic, yet being very kind of respectful to the traditions. And it's amazing that Taoism really seems to be, a movement of people that have embodied a lot of different knowledges and studies and brought it into practice. And it's amazing to see that. And you're right, it is coming to life. You hear, many people talking about these kind of concepts in different contexts now, but they come from different areas. We're talking about higher consciousness and alchemy and the zodiac and the astronomy of the solar system. We know scientifically that these things affect us, and it's all coming to life in this way. It's beautiful how it's melding this ancient story and then coming to life in people like yourself. So it's interesting. Your story is really, I think, telling the Tao story very well.
I wanted to add into that. I really like the way that you go about it, having a very practical approach and things that people can follow. Because I find with a lot of, I don't know what you'd call them, but a lot of teachers of ancient practices, I don't know, there's a kind of this new age sort of mindset where it's not really practical. There's a lot of talking and a lot of throwing these words around, but it's the practical aspect of it and how to actually relate that to your life and to your, the people around you. I find that so powerful and something that is really, it's a really nice way to, integrate it into your day-to-day life.
And so there's so much detail in this topic. We could really dive in forever, but I think probably, would be most, probably the best way to finish off is to really maybe lead us quickly through one of a meditation technique, explain some of the techniques that people can start to see how they can apply this in their everyday. And you do have videos on this on your website, and we've got them all linked in. We'd love to hear your explanation of some steps to get started.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. And thank you for the. I take that as a compliment that it was a practical way, because it's they say the proof is in the pudding, and it is sometimes. I like love and light. I want life to be easy and flow, but sometimes you don't get a good night's sleep, or for whatever reason, or you eat something that disagrees with you and your stomach's upset. So it comes back to the physical body. You can't deny. You ignore your body and it'll ignore you, and that's a little bit of the inner smile. And I'll take us through that meditation, but just to sort of lead into that, having this relationship with our body is so important. And I'll talk about this in different ways in videos or in articles on the website or things, but I'm happy to talk about it because it makes so much sense. But it's the analogy of someone who's leading a workforce, or a factory manager, or a boss at the office, who imagine that the way we treat our organs, if we treated our employees that way, what that would look like. And so a lot of times the way we treat our organs, certainly the way I did when I first started, or if I get too busy today, you have to come back to the organs, but we'll ignore them. We won't ask them for feedback. We won't pay attention to the messages they're trying to give us. Maybe back to the employee analogy, instead of giving them good quality wages in the form of healthy organic food and clean water and deep breaths, we give them shallow breaths, and we give them fast food. And we have a lot of soda over here in the United States, and I know it's made its way around the world, but that's the equivalent of giving poor wages to our organs. And eventually, if we treat employees like that, they'll walk off the job and quit, or something will happen where our organs just aren't working at all. Or we'll go to the doctor and find out that our heart is functioning at 3% capacity, and we have to have emergency surgery. And so this inner smile that I'll lead into in just a moment is a way of checking in with the organs. How are you doing? How are things today? How do you feel? And maybe it's not so deliberate of a conversation that way, but it's just a checking in, kind of a diagnostic check-in, like you might. A lot of people spend more time getting their car checked out than they do their own body. So we can start to do that ourselves and have some self-care. So are there any questions you think we could clear up before we kind of go into a meditation mode on that subject?
I think that makes sense. I love the idea of checking into organs. Yeah, it makes, they've all got their own jobs, and especially the analogy of wages for, everyone knows that you're not going to sustain good business unless you reward your employees. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, I'm looking forward to your description of how you practice this every day.
Okay. Well, we'll do, and we'll keep it short and simple, so it's something people can walk away from. But so we'll find ourselves sitting down in a chair, and you can have your feet flat on the floor so that your circulation in your legs is there. You can do this lying down, but sometimes we fall asleep when we're first learning. But just imagine that we're sitting in a chair, and take some deep breaths and tune into your breathing. And our lungs can have a tremendous amount of surface area. Could be like a football field, as big as a football field, surface area whenever we're breathing fully. So we want to just expand those lungs 360 degrees with some deep breaths, just to begin and kind of calm our physical body down, our nervous system. So sitting with your eyes closed, just take a few deep breaths. And if you can experience a feeling of letting go or relaxing or releasing on the exhale, that would be even more helpful. And so moving from the deep breaths into a bit of a check-in with the organs, I like to use my hands to help guide the energy. So just put our hands at our heart, and you can use both hands. And with our hands at our heart, just take some deep breaths and tune into that area and think about what our heart does for us. And that's pumping the blood around the body. And you can think about the virtues that I mentioned earlier of love, joy, happiness, and you see the color red as it relates to the heart and the fire phase of energy. So taking some deep breaths there. You can even see like a flower blooming, red flowers, a lotus or a rose blooming there at your heart. So just a simple thank you, even if you don't know what they do. A simple thank you to these organs will go a long way. And that breathing and that focusing on the positive virtue. And from the heart, we can expand the awareness and the hands out to the lungs. So the lungs just to the left and right there of the heart, and continuing our deep breathing. And we can see the color white. It really resonates with the lungs. And here we can see them as if they're expanding like flowers blooming as well. So whenever the sun comes up in the morning, flowers will turn toward it and open up. And we can imagine that the cells of our organs are doing that. So with the lungs here, as we're paying attention, we can say thank you for dealing with the outside environment and taking in that air and transforming it into oxygen that we can use. Then they expel the carbon dioxide and other things. But with the virtues, think about the virtue of courage and self-confidence, self-love, and a lot of these things are qualities that the planet Venus, which relates to this, are also associated with. So a couple of deep breaths there to the lungs and saying thank you. Then we'll move to the liver. Move our right hands over to the right side there at the bottom of the rib cage to the liver, smiling, seeing the color green like that spring scene that I mentioned earlier with the grass growing and the leaves on the trees, and that first birth of spring where the thunder is bringing the rains and cracking open the seeds that are underground as they start to grow up. Think of the virtues of kindness, forgiveness, being a good neighbor there, helping the helping the liver to be flexible, and the qualities of you as an individual to also be flexible. It's like a tree that moves in a storm is the one that survives, the person that can be flexible in storms of life. And so just thanking the liver for what it does for us, smiling there. And we'll move over to the left side at the bottom of the rib cage where the spleen is, and the pancreas goes across the solar plexus. So you can put both of your hands in the spleen and pancreas area. And, again, saying thank you and gratitude. The color yellow, like the earth element. And you can think about the soil of the earth that you see and the stability that the earth provides for us. And the qualities of trust and being grounded and stability in your routines and your habits and being predictable. Those are good qualities that help the spleen and the pancreas to feel supported and they feel comfortable there. So just tuning in, thank you. And these deep breaths that we're continuing to take can help bring energy to the area where our hands are and where our awareness is. Then moving to the last of the 5 phases that we'll touch on now, we can move our hands back to our kidneys. And if that's uncomfortable to sit with your hands at your lower back, then you can rest with your hands at your navel. Taking some deep breaths there to the kidneys and thinking of the qualities of gentleness and stillness, like water on a calm day. Thinking of the color blue with the kidneys. as we take those deep breaths, our diaphragm moves up and down and really gives a gentle massage to the organs of the torso. So we'll take a couple more deep breaths here. If you can, smile to not only just the kidneys, but the other organs that we've tuned into, and just thanking this entire team, how it all works together so well for your overall benefit and enables you to reach out and help others by growing that virtue. Be a functioning, giving member of the human population. And at the very end here, to close this up, you can do a brief massage around your navel. So we want to store the energy here in our lower centers rather than in our head or in our heart. It's safe and it can nourish us. So I massage a little bit clockwise, a little bit counterclockwise, maybe 10 times in each direction, just to kind of direct the energy to stay there. And that's it. That's I think maybe 7 minutes or so, but it's a meditation that everyone can do on their own. Yeah, I like to do it before I start my work day. I get to whether it's at home before I go or in the shower, or when I first get to my desk, I can sit down and do that inner smile, so that then the activities that flow throughout the day are at least had a chance to start from a place of an inner smiling idea. So what questions do you have or feedback? I'd love to see if I can elaborate on that practice.
I just want to say thanks for running us through that. That was really nice. I find that type of meditation so powerful in grounding you, in letting everything, all the stresses and all the day-to-day thoughts sort of sink down and sort of just have a bit of acceptance that it's all you don't have to let those outside forces dictate the way you feel, and you can sort of, I don't know how to describe it. I was going through it as you were explaining it, so I'm feeling pretty peaceful right now.
I really like the idea of thanking individual organs, because we know they have such crucial individual roles that have overall benefits, like you say, as a team. So I love that concept, and it really does make a lot of sense, especially for people that suffer certain problems. They can really focus energy to kind of get the team, helping, pick up one that's maybe struggling, or that. I think that can be really beneficial for people. Yeah. So it was effective for me. I felt deep relaxation, but also I think that could be such a simple technique for people to focus in on certain health problems.
Yeah, I think that's why I really love it. Love this philosophy as a whole. Or I'm not sure if you call it a philosophy, way of life, or but just the way that you, the way that it enables you to be, and that it's not necessarily, there's no goal in a way. There's no kind of, you're not striving to get somewhere, which is kind of the way that our minds have been geared to think. It's nice to sort of let all those ideas sort of dissolve away and just be aware, be more aware of yourself and the energies.
Yeah, Andrew, it's such a pleasure to talk to you and hear about your work, and thank you very much for bringing this to life. And we'd love to dive in the future as well. And but you've written 2 books and you're a practitioner. Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on here. It's just, the old Taoist masters, that they would hide in the mountains and just collect herbs and practice. They said if they just had one student in their lifetime, or one person that was interested in learning, then their life could be a success. So any opportunity I get just to talk to somebody about this, I feel like it's a real treat and an honor to, because this is, again, I've spent a lot of time and money and energy learning these things because I enjoy it and it's fun. And so I love to share it with other people. And it was great to be here talking with you gentlemen too. And to find more about this, I've got a website, thedaoblog.com, and that's HETAO blog.com. And I'm also on social media, Instagram and Facebook under the Tao blog, Twitter. And I try to just put a little something out there that maybe helps people think in a different way, or maybe it's instructional, or maybe it's a quote, or it's just writing. And you mentioned 2 books. One of them is called The Alchemists Tao Ching, Transforming Your Lead into Gold. And it has kind of just my thoughts on the classic Tao Te Ching, which is there's 200 to 300 versions of it. It's been kind of interpreted many times. Hopefully I'll bring something new there, but it also has practices. And along with the 81 verses, there's 81 practices of Qigong and meditation that a person can think about and maybe practice. So that's the book that's most relevant to the things we're talking. And then the other book is Growing a Healthy Workforce, Leading in the 8 Dimensions of Workplace Wellness. And so if someone's an organizational leader out there, or they're in the business world and they want people to be a little healthier, then I think they would find a few things in that book that could get practical, low-cost, grounded, down-to-earth things that can show your employees that you care about. And it's also very, it's kind of an undercover Taoist book in a way. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk about that. You're very kind.
I love how you dress it like that. It's great that you give people the opportunity to learn about these things without actually thinking that they're going into an ancient philosophy. That's wonderful. All right, Angel, thank you very much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure, and we hope to learn more and hear more about your work. And we'd love to experience your practice in person. It's fascinating the way you're bringing this all to life.
Well, thank you. And this was a lot of fun. If you ever want to do it again, I'd be happy to come on, and there's way more we can talk about. So thanks again.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks so much for your time. Yeah, looking forward to hopefully meeting you in America one day.
Oh, that'd be great. We're for now, the borders are still open, and we'd love to have you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you for listening to today's show. For more information, you can read the full transcript, articles, and discussion on our website, humanoriginproject.com. You can visit us on social media at Human Origin Project on Facebook and The Human Origin Project on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter or join the forum boards and email list to keep up to date with all the new information. And if you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe on iTunes and leave a review, because it helps others to find this information and helps us to bring you the topics you want to discuss and hear about. Until next week, I hope your life is filled with happiness, healthiness, and harmony.